You've probably noticed by now that men and women are a little different. Yet one area where we do align is the fact that most of us want to live to a ripe old age, happily, with as little illness as possible. And that's where one of the big differences pops up. As it turns out, men and women differ a fair bit when it comes to health, how long each of us is likely to live for, and what's most likely to make us unwell. The good, or not so good news, depending on your point of view, is that females are likely to live longer. A female born between 2015 and 2017 is likely to live over 4 years more than a male counterpart. In fact, when you look at the numbers, this gap between males and females starts early, with 3 out of 4 sudden infant deaths affecting boys, and 3 out of 5 children who die before the age of 15 are also boys. In adulthood, the trend continues. 7 out of 10 deaths between the age of 15 and 24 are male, and 65% of us who die before the age of 65 are also male. When it comes to longevity, women are 3 times more likely to live to 100 or older. So why the difference? Is it genetics? Is it due to boys and men taking more risks? Or is it lifestyle? To be honest, no one knows for certain yet, but there are some factors that are likely to contribute to the problems. To understand these factors, we need to look into both men's and women's health. So what about genetics? Well, despite the obvious differences, men and women aren't that genetically different. Yet one difference may play a role, and that's estrogen. It's the primary sex hormone for females. In Australia, heart disease is our leading cause of early death, and Aussie women, on average, develop heart disease 10 years later compared to men. Now, studies have shown that estrogen affects almost every tissue or organ system, and that includes the heart and blood vessels. Estrogen's known effects on the cardiovascular system include an increase in HDL cholesterol, that's the good kind, a decrease in LDL cholesterol, that's the bad kind. It also relaxes, smooths, and dilates blood vessels, so blood flow increases. Estrogen also soaks up free radicals, which are naturally occurring particles in the blood that can cause damage to the arteries and other tissues. The other big difference between men and women is where we tend to store body fat. We've all seen the cliche images of men with the barrel belly or beer gut. That's right, men preferentially store fat or excess energy in the midsection, not under the skin but deep in and around the organs. This fat is toxic, it's visceral fat, and it's a major risk for heart disease and diabetes. Women, on the other hand, are a little different. Up until menopause, women tend to store fat preferentially around the hips, buttocks and thighs. Now this fat is more resistive, which means it's harder for the body to move and less likely to interfere with the heart and other systems, so it's much less toxic. But these reasons, whilst contributing to the gap between males and females, isn't enough to explain things completely. Lifestyle probably plays a part as well. Most of us are aware of males, especially in the 15 to 25 year age bracket, taking more risks than females. And this shows up when you look at the stats on land transport accidents and emergency department visits. Risk-taking isn't the only lifestyle contributor though. In fact, the difference in healthy behaviours between men and women is fairly stark. The good news is that males are slightly more active than women, but men are twice as likely to drink a sugary drink every day, twice as unlikely to get enough fruit and veg in their diet, and sadly they're twice as likely to avoid the doctor when they're sick. Men are more likely to be overweight or obese, smoke more, and drink alcohol at risky levels, and 9 out of 10 workplace deaths affect males. So it appears that the health gap between men and women comes down to a mix of genetics, but also health behaviours. But this doesn't mean that females are risk-free though. As we said earlier, heart disease is most likely to prevent us from achieving our life expectancy. That's because of the large amount of people affected after the age of 45. When you take a look under the covers, risks change by age and by gender. For example, if you're an adult under the age of 45, male or female, your biggest risk of premature death is suicide, followed by land transport accidents. The thing most likely to affect your quality of life? Well, that's mental health problems and problems with your back. Once we hit our late 40s and 50s, things look a little different. Heart disease and lung cancer cause the most premature male deaths, whereas a female is more likely to die from breast cancer or lung cancer. The things most likely to affect your quality of life in your 40s and 50s? Well, that's complications from heart disease, problems with your muscles, bones and joints, and mental health problems. What that all tells us, if we want to live to a ripe old age happily with as little disease as possible, we need to pay attention to the things that we can control, because at the moment we can't change our genetics. This means investing in our mental health in our 20s, 30s and 40s, and taking things such as stress, anxiety and depression seriously. It also means investing in the habits and ways of living during our 20s, 30s and 40s that are going to keep our risk of heart disease and cancers as low as possible. Investing in a healthy diet, regular movement, keeping the weight off, dodging the darts and drinking wisely will all have the biggest impact on our risk later on. Last but not least, build a relationship with your family GP. If you haven't got one, find one, so that when things do start to change, you can work together on getting in early, screening for those nasties and taking action early when needed. At the end of the day, the things most likely to cause premature death or disease in Australia are modifiable. And that means that we can influence them. And that's what we need to focus on, regardless if you're male or female and you want to live to a ripe old age, happily, with as little disease as possible.